Hi everyone, and welcome back to my channel. I'm Sarah of Horror. I review movies and TV shows and even documentaries. And don't worry, I've been out in the sun all day by the water. I did use a lot of protection cream and oils. Didn't really work, as you can see, but don't be alarmed. This will probably go away tomorrow or in 2 days. But yes, today I look a bit burnt, so yeah, that's the deal with that. But today we're actually going to talk about something quite serious and a little bit different from my other videos. Usually, I review like 3 or 4 horror movies or movies, but a lot of horror movies. And also like a series of films. And I talked about Fallout, the first TV show I did. But now I'm going to talk about a very serious true crime documentary. I've talked about a true crime documentary before, but this one really stands out. Yes, I am talking about the Ken and Barbie Killers, The Lost Murder Tapes documentary. So this documentary is about Paul Bernardo and Karla Homolka and the crimes they committed, which were truly awful, atrocious, and just very hard to hear about. So yeah, this video will not be like as upbeat and uh, light as usual, uh, because this documentary just really made me just very angry, very sad, emotional. Like I was just feeling a lot of stuff. I do listen to a lot of true crime podcasts. I watch a lot of true crime on YouTube, a lot of videos, a lot of documentaries on all the streaming sites and series and whatnot. Grew up with a mom who always watched every true crime thing on Discovery Channel, the ID. So I've, heard my fair share of true crime things in my life. And of course, everyone is awful. And we have to think about, people died and they went through horrific things. But I have to say that this documentary, it really stands out, and that is why I want to talk about it. I'm not going to do like a true crime episode where I go, dive deep into the crimes and analyze them. That is not what I'm doing here at all. I am just talking about this documentary in particular. So this documentary consists of 4 episodes. And first, we are introduced, of course, to the lives of Karla Homolka and Paul Bernardo. First, separately, and then we get to know how they met, and also we get to see a lot of their interactions through VHS tapes because they loved to film a lot. This was, when the VHS camera came, and it was very popular at the time, and it just had gained its use. And yeah, they were like filming constantly. Family gatherings they were doing, and other things that, can seem kind of mundane and kind of boring at first, like the things we're allowed to see. But once you know about the things that they did, even these mundane scenarios that we get to see suddenly have more meaning to them. They become more evil. And I mean, I knew about this couple before I saw this documentary, so I had known some things about them, but not like in detail. It was a long time ago, and I saw this documentary because I wanted to just refresh my memory and see if maybe I would learn some new details about their crimes, about their victims. And I did learn a lot. Like, it was just so much worse than I imagined it to be. So, of course, this documentary has people being interviewed that knew both Carla and Paul Bernardo, uh, and they're talking about from their perspective, like knowing them before all this stuff came out, knowing them before they did anything. And I always think that's quite interesting when we see people who actually knew them, like really knew them, like their best friends, family members, etc. And it's quite interesting to seeing how they talk about them, before and then after the realization of them, yeah, being killers. Like how just everything changes and like small details that suddenly seem very important that these people remember, like, oh, now, okay, that makes sense. And I mean, also just the realization that you knew someone, or you were like best friends, or you were a very close friend to someone who's like serial killer, and a someone who like sexually assaulted a lot of women. And I mean, that must just feel awful. Like there has to be so many conflicting emotions going on. And that is also what I liked about this documentary. It brought up a lot of things from different perspectives. Of course, as with each episode, we dive deeper and deeper and deeper into the crimes being committed and the reveal. So we have also a section focused on the sexual assaults that happened in Scarborough, Canada between 1987 and 1990. So yeah, they were looking for the Scarborough rapist, and they had a composite sketch which was eerily similar to Paul Bernardo. Yeah, I mean, when I saw that sketch, I was like, that is like spot on. And it just gave me chills. And then we get to know that they moved away, and eventually, they started killing people. And one of these victims was actually Karla Homolka's own sister, Tammy. Yeah. So they go into that specific incident like before knowing the true crimes and nature of Paul Bernardo and Karla Homolka. So first it's treated like an accident, but then it just gets a total darker meaning. And through these VHS tapes, we also get to know just a lot about all the twisted situations and kind of the mindset of Karla. Because this is also one of the things that I really like about this documentary. It also showcases one of the most awful, horrible mistakes that the prosecutioners did. They just made a horrible plea bargain deal with Karla, which is one of the worst things that I've ever seen, and I am disgusted by that. Because the main thing about this documentary is that Karla goes to the police and says that there are these VHS tapes that her and Paul have found, and on these tapes they show the assaults and the murders of these young girls, of the victims. So the police are searching. They want to find these tapes because these tapes will change everything. But then the prosecution just makes this horrible deal. And I like that documentary focuses a lot on that, because that just made me so angry. I'm glad that they didn't like downtone it, so you downplay it, because that is just awful, and that should not be allowed to happen. So I can understand the outrage and the just the injustice when that happened, because I mean, this case was huge. The trial was huge. It was, I think, probably the biggest trial that time in Canada, I think. And I mean, I can understand why. When I was watching the documentary, I just realized how big it is, or how big that was at that time. Because what I knew beforehand, like I didn't realize how big this trial and this case was. And then watching that documentary, it just all hit me. And I kind of felt like, wow, this must have been just very heartbreaking case and just trial to follow and to just hear about over and over every day for such a long, long time. And also, the media weren't allowed to talk about this case at a certain point, and they also kind of bring that up, which I also found very interesting because that detail I had no idea about. So that for me was quite interesting to like understand and get to know more about like these plea bargains, these deals that can be made. And I was just, my mind was like, a lot of things like were handled very badly in this whole trial, this whole case, by the prosecution, but also by the defense. The defense for Paul Bernardo made such a horrible mistake. They just, yeah, I was just stunned. I couldn't believe like what I was seeing. Yeah, that was just a really big mistake. So I think both sides made a lot of really bad decisions and awful uh, mistakes for sure. Also, what I liked about this documentary, which was probably the hardest part of it, was we got to hear this being told through the eyes of people who had seen these tapes, because they were eventually found, and we get to hear from one jury member and from one woman who was working for the defense for a short while, and like what they said about these tapes. Yeah, I mean, you could physically see how these tapes changed them. Like it changed them like for the rest of their lives. Uh, you could clearly see they were traumatized by what they had seen. And just hearing them describe things, talk about things, talk about the victims, it honestly, it made me cry. That was such a hard thing to listen to just take in, to kind of imagine. Like I didn't really want to imagine, but I mean there was no way of escaping that. And so that is the part that really made an impact with me. Just kind of reliving what these women had seen. And yeah, so I think that is a really important thing to talk about, like people who are in the jury. Like imagine being selected to the jury and it's on a case like this, where you have to see like the most awful, disgusting, vile things through tapes. You have to watch it. Like you're in a jury, you have to watch it. And I mean, that is like something that you will never forget. And just processing that must be awful. Like yeah, that must be just so horrible. So that is definitely one of the aspects that like just really got me, and I will probably never forget this documentary because of that, and how just that detail alone made me feel. I didn't even watch those tapes, but still, just by seeing their reactions, just something inside of me just kind of broke. And yeah, I had tears coming down my cheeks, and yeah, it was hard watching this documentary. I can say especially episode 4. That was probably the hardest one. So that is why I think this is a really important documentary that really tells everything about this couple, but also the kind of mentality that they both had, and how, you know, everything just got darker and more awful, and just how it affected people around them. Not just people just who knew them, but people, you know, the jury members, the people that had to watch the tapes, the people that, just a lot of people's lives were affected in such a horrific way. But I also like that this documentary brings up the victims. They focuses on the victims, which I think is really important in every true crime documentary podcast, that, you know, the victims are acknowledged. The victims, they had futures, they had lives that were taken away from them. I mean, the victims should, in my opinion, get more time, get more space than these like awful killers, these awful people who do awful things. So I do like that they focus on the victims as much as they can. Get to see like a few videos of them, like home videos, you know, some pictures, some background stories, their families talking about them, and get to see some really like rough films of their families, like after, like during the trial, after the trial, and it is heartbreaking. It really is. Like it all just seems so senseless. That is like the feeling I get, is that it's so senseless. Take away, like taking away these lives, and just for what, the killer's own pleasure, like sick pleasure. So it really hits home in documentaries of these types. They bring up the victims. I really want to learn more about the victims, because I think that is super important, because yeah, they are never coming back, no matter like, no matter the sentence that the killers get, if they are caught and get like the strongest sentence or being sentenced to death, like the victims, they are never coming back. Families have to live with this thing forever. They have to grieve this forever, have to live with this. And sometimes you have like killers who don't even care about anything. So yeah, it's always like with a heavy heart that I watch these uh, documentaries, but this one in particular, as I said, was very, very hard and very emotional. And if you do want to see more true crime documentaries, you are also interested in the psychology behind it, the knowing more about certain cases, and if you don't know so much about this particular case, then I think you should really watch this one. I saw it on Max. You know, it was HBO Max, now it's Max, so that is where I saw it. And they also added a lot of other true crime documentaries and shows. So I do recommend watching a lot of their stuff, but this one in particular, it kind of feels weird rating this type of documentary, but since, you know, it really hit home for me, it still lives rent free in my mind. I really think about this case a lot. It made me very emotional, and it just took up so many details and took up so many themes that I thought were important, that I didn't really know a lot about. I am giving this one a 10 out of 10. So yeah, thank you so much for watching. And as I said, this episode is a bit different, a bit more toned down than usual, a bit more emotional, a lot of heavy feelings, heavy stuff. And as I said, I wasn't planning on, you know, going into any of the cases in detail. I'm not a true crime like video YouTube maker. I review and talk about movies and documentaries and stuff. And also I feel that it would just be out of place for me to venture into something that I not like that familiar with, or because I don't want to present it in a non-respectful way, or I really want to do my research like 100% and for a long time if I would ever delve into something like that. But I feel my channel is not that kind of a channel. And, we just tiptoed into what they did. But as I said, if you want to know more about this, check out the documentary and yeah, see for yourselves. And if you've seen the documentary, please let me know your own thoughts about it. And also let me know if you're planning on watching the documentary. So yeah, thank you so much for watching, and I hope you've had a really good weekend, and more videos will be up next week. So thank you all so much, and please consider subscribing. Bye.